Let's begin with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, beloved friend God, great masters of Kriya Yoga, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, great master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, we bow to you all. Divine Mother, may our hearts be open to receive thy teachings. Guide us in all that we do. We are thy Mother. Be thou eternally ours. Sadhana Devi, who's here after a very long absence, is going to start with a little introduction, and then I'll pick up from that point.
Namaste and welcome. My name is Nayaswamis Jaya Sadhana Devi. I am happy to be here today and see all my old friends, many of my old friends at least, and many new ones here. So I hope to have the opportunity to meet you, if I haven't already, meet you sometime later today and get to know all of you. As Jaya mentioned, I've been away for some time. We're generally based in America these days, but Jaya comes back often, and I hope to be able to come back more often myself. It's very nice to be with you all today. Jaya asked me to just say a few words about Kriya in general, which could be applied to anyone at this point, whether or not you already are a Kriyavan, or you're going to take Kriya today, or you may in the future take Kriya. Jaya and I met at Ananda village in California in 1969, which was the year that the actual work there really began. And both of us came there, and there were not very many people, maybe 10 or 12 people were there. We had a retreat very similar to this one. And I think it maybe have been actually more muddy than it is here. Maybe not, but pretty close. And so we were there, and we helped work the staff there along with other people. And throughout the summer, we had many retreats, similar to the kind of retreat we're having here today. And toward the end of the summer, Swami Kriyananda gave one of the very first Kriya initiations that he had given at Ananda itself. He had, before Ananda began, he had a work in San Francisco in the city, and so he gave some Kriya initiations there. But this was the first one, I believe, or one of the first. And so I took it along with many other people, and I received the technique. I learned how to do it, just as we all did. And afterwards, I went off about my business and did the work that we do and all of that. And about a week later, I was chatting with someone who had also taken it at the same time as I had. And he said, "Oh, have you been practicing your Kriya that you learned a week ago?" Well, I have been. And I thought, this is a bad habit that I had. Starting things that looked interesting, and then going and learning about them, and then kind of letting them go. I think it's kind of a common habit. And so I, of course, had done that. So, okay. Yes, I'm going to be practicing a lot in the future. I haven't been practicing much at all, but that's what I was going to do. And so I committed myself. I actually did commit myself. And months went by, and I discovered to my surprise that I actually was doing this. I was practicing twice a day as I was taught, and I was following the instructions as I had learned. And I found, this was sort of a new thing to me. I had this, as I say, this bad habit of not following through on too many things. And I found something was different. Something had happened. And I was behaving in a different way. We speak about discipleship when we prepare to take Kriya. We speak about discipleship and attunement. And one of the questions that always comes up when we talk about attunement is, Well, how do you attune to the gurus, to the great ones? How do you do this? Well, one of the first things we can do is practice what they teach us. That's why these techniques are here. They're here to help us on this spiritual path. There are many, many, many paths out there. There are many, many practices that people do. And if you practice with attunement, whatever the path is, it will take you to your goal. If you practice it with attunement, meaning if you practice it with the thought that I am doing what the Guru has told, explained to me, given to me. I am doing this in this spirit. I am committing myself to this particular path, knowing that probably all of the paths are valid and take one to one's goal, but we have to choose one. And this is what happens when we reach that level of commitment throughout the beginning steps. When we reach that level when we know that this is our path. And so that's when we really begin to really truly practice attunement. Some weeks back, I went to another city in California to give a satsang on a Sunday, and I had not ever been there. And so I asked the woman who was in charge of that center there how to get there. So she said, oh, well, you can take routes such and such, and you can go over here to that city over there, and then you can turn there, and then you can go up north a bit, and if you'd like, you can stop off for lunch over here. And after a while, I said, how do you get there? I was thinking, I just want to get there. I'm not that interested in going all these different places. I just want to get from here to there. And so she said, okay, well, this is the way I go. And so it was obviously a much more direct route. Well, Kriya and all of the techniques from the great ones are like a roadmap. They show us how to get to the goal in the shortest possible time, with the least amount of confusion and distraction, and with commitment, with loyalty. And they show us how to do this. This is a roadmap for us. And every time we get confused on the path, and it happens all the time, we stop, we practice our Kriya. Lahiri Mahashay's advice as we read has been, was, and still is, for anybody who came with any kind of question, the first thing he said was, do your Kriya. And then after that, he might have some other advice as well. But that was the most important thing. Practice your Kriya. Practice the technique that has been given to you by your Guru, who knows exactly what you need. Practice that, and you will find that you are making spiritual progress. The years will go by, and you will look back, and you will see in many situations how you were guided, having no idea that you were guided at all. And you see the hand of the Guru right there guiding you. Some years ago, before I even came to India, I grew up in America. I was a typical American who is sarcastic. I love to say sarcastic things. And I went on like this for years and years, and I had no desire to stop doing that. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then one day, sort of seemingly out of nowhere, I just thought, I guess I won't do this anymore. I think that's enough. I don't need to do this. I'm done. Finished. And I never really, with any enthusiasm, got back into it. Yes, I did find myself doing this out of habit, but as far as interest in thinking it was fun, I sort of stopped. I just wasn't there anymore. And it was only after at least 6 months, maybe a year, when I realized that I had been guided by Master to stop doing this. It's not good for anyone to do it, and it's especially bad for ourselves, because we just it brings our mind down into not into an uplifted state. And I realized, I've been guided to stop doing this. And the next thing that happened to me was that I came here to India, where sarcasm is not very well known. Oh, how nice. It was refreshing to be here and not have all this sort of cynical, unpleasant kind of talk from people. It just wasn't there. And that was sort of the last thing, that last sort of piece of that whole experience that needed to happen. I needed to be in an environment where I was free of it. It didn't happen. That wasn't with me all the time. And so I see how clearly Yogananda was there, seeing that, this is not a good thing for her to be doing. She needs to stop. But she thinks it's great. She thinks it's wonderful, so she's going to keep doing it until something guides her in a different way. And well, often we find that we've had something terrible happen to us that makes us stop doing things. The school of hard knocks is what we call it in America. Things like that happen, but this was subtle, and I didn't go through some terrible trauma to come to that point. I just stopped. And then I was brought to an environment that supported not doing that, and that gave me a different way of looking at things. And if one looks throughout their life, I've been practicing Kriya now since, it was 1969 that we started. I've been practicing since then, and now and then I look at something in my life that happened to me, or that I did that was new for me, and I see it had nothing to do with me and my mind and all of that. It was all the guidance of the Guru. And this is what Kriya, and as I say, all of these higher techniques that are taught by any great master, all of these will take you, like a roadmap, will take you to your goal quicker, more easily, better in whatever way, the right way for you. And so this is why Kriya and all of those are important. They help us to attune ourselves to the Guru's grace and the Guru's guidance. And it doesn't matter what technique it is, if it's the technique that your Guru gave you, that's the right one for you.
Welcome, everybody. This weekend is a very special one. It's always special when we have a pre-initiation. And I'd like to do this morning in our discourse, offer some preparatory remarks. Because we're having the video this morning also, I'm going to have to cut my remarks short because the video is going to take up a good amount of time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin the remarks this morning. For those of you coming to the initiation, which is most of you, all do the second half of the remarks this afternoon at that initiation. But I realize that some of you may not be coming to that. You're not prepared for the initiation, or perhaps you're just here for the morning. So I want to preface what I'm about to say a little bit, because if I was to cut it, if you were to only hear what I have to say in the morning, you may go away with an impression of Kriya that I don't wish you to go away with, only because I'm not able to say the other side of the story, which I'm going to reserve for this afternoon. And just to preface it a little bit further, let me say that when we speak about Kriya, what I'm going to speak about today is Kriya. You might say there are three aspects, and I want to speak about one of them this morning. And the other two I'll finish off, because the other two, I think all of you who are Kriya bonds probably know them already well enough, and I'll just have to say a few words about them to spark your remembrance of them. But the three things are, if you were to say, what would one say about Kriya, encapsulate it, the things that, the areas that one might want to focus on, the first thing would be to Kriya is a technique. And so this morning I want to address a few remarks about technique in general. Not necessarily the Kriya technique, that's for another time, but just the idea of technique. The other two are attitude and devotion. Now, you can see, if you're here only for the morning and you went away and said, yes, what is Kriya all about? It's about technique. And that's what I'm leaving here with that impression. And if you don't take away the other two, which are probably of the three, is certainly equal, maybe even more valuable, maybe more important, which is devotion, attitude. They are essential to have those two, attitude, devotion. But I'll leave those for the initiation, and that's their more proper place. So I want to say some words about technique. Now, when I began, this was back in 1969, if we want to go back and pick up that story, I came to this path. I had met Swami the year before that, and was initiated at that same initiation as Sadhana Devi mentioned. And as a young person, I was very enthusiastic about technique. And I read the autobiography, and like you, if you've read the autobiography, and if you haven't, you should, but if you read the autobiography, you will remember the chapter on Kriya Yoga, and he describes the Kriya Yoga technique. And I've extracted some quotes from that, which I'd like to share with you. But he shares about the technique, and he makes a distinction in there, or he makes an assertion of 1,000,000 years of evolutionary progress it takes in order for a typical soul yogi to be able to attain cosmic consciousness. And one Kriya practice can substitute for one of those years of natural evolution. I read that, and I thought, yes, that's for me, 1,000,000. And I began to think, well, and how many days might it take me, or how many years it might take me? And this is a common thing. A young person with an overactive brain can do that, do the mathematics on that. And I was approaching that way, and I had some friends, and we would talk about that in that way. And we went along, and I received the Kriya, and that winter I had spent pretty much the following winter at that piece of property in seclusion. And so I had lots of time on my hands, and lots of time to practice, which I did. And of course, each day, a number of Kriyas, I'm that much closer to cosmic consciousness. A little bit in there. Now, I have to say, I knew on some level that there was something wrong with that sort of thinking. Now, wrong in some way, but a master writes something, so there obviously is a meaning. But somehow my interpretation and what I took from that, I realized that there was something, my application was probably not exactly correct, and my attitude toward it was a little bit mechanical. And I mention this is because when we approach the technique of Kriya, and I started, it's very important. And we read the autobiography of the yogi, and that technique of Kriya jumps out at the reader. You cannot help but notice it, and you cannot help but want to practice that. I want to do that. I want to learn Kriya Yoga. And I'm sure that was Yoganandaji's intention, was to stimulate that interest. So yes, it's very important. But we also have to remember there's other things that are equally, if not more so, also important. The guru relationship right there. That I could have added that too. Let's say that's part of the attitude. Well, I went about that, practicing that technique, but I was stimulated to mention it today because not too long ago, since I do teach Kriya and I'm interested in things of Kriya, I was reading on the internet in a forum that somebody was writing in. They were mentioning about Kriya, and it was it had a negative tone to it. This person was disparaging Yoganandaji. And in the sense that he said, I read that autobiography of the yogi, and it said, if I practice Kriya for 1,000,000 practices of the Kriya technique, I will attain cosmic consciousness. Now, he didn't say if he had practiced 1,000,000, but he said, I've known people who practiced that 1,000,000 times, done 1,000,000 Kriyas, and they have not attained cosmic consciousness. And he went quite at length about how this obviously proves this must not be a master because his master's words are falsified. Now, a bit simplistic thinking, but nevertheless, I began to think about it. I thought, that is the fruit of somebody who does not understand the subtleties of attitude, devotion, and an outward focus on literal technique alone, which is sometimes what people come to Kriya with. I'm practicing this technique. God, I will give you, Guru, I will give you so many pesa, and then you're going to give me this much cosmic consciousness. It's that attitude. It's a merchant attitude to go at it that way. And I invest in this much. What are you giving me? Now, that now is clear to me. Perhaps back in 1969, I had a subtle sense of that, but maybe not. I didn't quite have the experience to objectify that in my mind. And so with that, I wanted to start by saying the technique is very important, but we have to understand there's something more to it. Now, I also, but it was stimulated to think, well, Master did say 1,000,000 Kriyas, but what did he mean? What did he mean about that? And I wanted to share a few quotes, and then I want to explore that topic a little bit, if I have time. And I'm just going to read these quotes. I'll come back to them. First quote. Attaining the power of sense disconnection, the yogi finds it simple to untie his mind at will with divine realms or with the world of matter. Attaining the power of sense disconnection, the yogi begins to do that. He's like in control. Attaining the power of disconnecting from the senses, the yogi can do that. How many of us have done that so far? Have we disconnected? I don't know. Okay, let me do another one. Consciousness is intimately linked with breath mastery. Consciousness is intimately linked with breath mastery. This is all, by the way, out of that chapter on Kriya Yoga. We must untie the cord of breath, which binds the soul to the body. Okay. The life force may be freed for higher activities by a method of calming and stilling the demands, the ceaseless demands of the breath. Okay, it's more along the same line. Fixity of attention depends on slow reading. The yogi scientifically makes breath unnecessary. Okay, do we get a theme there? Coming together? Okay, now before I read these next ones, basically what he's saying, he says we must transcend breath. If we want that cosmic consciousness, we must transcend the breath. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody away, but nor do I want to set the bar so high that you would say that's impossible. I can't possibly do that. You can't, and that's why you're going to be practicing Kriya. But I want you to understand that this is not child's play. We are not just practicing this to feel a little bit better in the afternoon. We're doing this for a very serious purpose. And if you approach it with that intention, you'll gain. And it's meant for people who have that object, that goal in mind, to go beyond this breath. And that seems like a radical statement for a new person coming in. But that's what we're going to do. That's why we want to do that. And this is what we're going to do. But this is not normal practice in the world. You go out and tell your coworkers that Infosys or wherever it might be that you're that, oh, this is what I think. No, what are they going to say? They're not going to. You put yourself outside the realm, so you keep these things quiet. You don't talk about these things because, one, it doesn't help them, and certainly it will not help you to be talking about these things casually in that regard. But I mention them here because we're here this weekend. This is why we're here, to do that. Because we're here to undertake a grand experiment and see it that way. A grand experiment to transcend this body. Transcend this body. And why? Why do we want to transcend that breath? Ego. Plain and simple. The process of learning, the process of self-realization, the process of cosmic consciousness is learning to transcend the ego. And this is something that is very, very difficult to do, but yet this is why we have these techniques that give us a handle. Now it says in the Yoga Sutras that the yogi neutralizes the breath through the light sound, neutralizes the waves of chitta through neutralizing the waves of chitta, likes and dislikes. Now, we do that because when that happens, we rest. We rest in the divine self when the waves of chitta are neutralized. Instead of, and when they're not neutralized, we ride on top of the waves, which means that we live in an egoic self. Now, I mentioned this is because breath mastery means learning to calm the breath, learning to still the breath, learning to go beyond the breath, because the breath is intimately reflective of egoic consciousness. So long as you're breathing, you're going to be living in the ego. But all the scriptures on the deepest level, it's not just here in India, this is in the West, if understood on the deeper level. If we want to go beyond this separation between this duality, this world of Vaita that we live in, if we want to go beyond that and understand that state and experience that state of cosmic consciousness, that oneness, that is something that we have to go beyond that sense of separation. And that is what the ego is. The ego separates us from one another. I'm from you and you from him. And it leads to all, you turn on the television and you watch the news, all of that is that based on separation, me from you, from another, I want it, you want it, we fight. And that's at the basis of it all. And so if we want to have that cosmic consciousness that is promised for us, we have to go beyond that. And that's what we're doing. And there's a relationship. Now, I don't have time to explain that relationship. I hope your classes by this time have explained that a little bit of what that is. But that's what we're trying to do, is go beyond. And that, the other two things that we're going to talk about this afternoon a little bit, touch on, attitude and devotion, or you might say, address this in a more softer way. But the technique itself has its place, and at the basis of what we're going to do, and why the masters brought this. They brought this technique so that we could practice, so that as we could fulfill what these quotes are talking about, untying the knot that ties the soul to the body and identifies with this body. That's what Kriya is going to do for us, and that's why we're going to practice. Now, the problem was that I don't want to leave it on this level of technique, is because what I have found is that people who focus on technique, to the exclusion of what we want to talk about this afternoon, what becomes of them? They become egoic. It's exactly what happens. And this is the downfall, if you would call it that, or the negative side. Every path has its pluses and its minuses. Raja Yoga has it's wonderful. It's a great path. But it has a potential. Everyone has a potential. It has the potential to stimulate something. It stimulates pride. It can. stimulate pride. And why does it stimulate pride? Because Raja Yoga will give you what you want. Raja, you want to be the king. It will give you what you want. And in the process, make you prideful. It makes you egoic. It can make you egoic if you don't balance it. Because I am the doer. This is what the Gita is saying. We want to go beyond that. Get rid of that sense of I am the doer. God is the doer. But when we do technique, I am doing this technique. Look, I've done 108, so many days, and I'm up to 770,000. And I am getting there. Now that's a good sign. I mean, it's good to be motivated. But who is the doer? Who is the doer? If you're the doer, that's the problem, you see. And so this is why we have to balance it. So let me go on with my few quotes here. What Master said, 1 million. What do you mean? Oh, let's see. The shortcut, of course, can be taken only by deeply developed yogis with the guidance of a guru. Such yogis have carefully prepared their bodies and brains to receive the power needed by intensive practice. Deeply developed yogis with the guidance of the guru. That's who Kriya is for. When does the 1,000,000 years begin? I don't think it begins when you take your first Kriya initiation. I don't. That's not my feeling is. It could. But if you're doing something with your mind elsewhere, doing it this way, that way, it's meant for deeply developed yogis. People who have made some progress on untying that knot. Maybe people who can actually meditate. And where meditation begins? When you stop the breath. Maybe it starts there. I don't know. But I want you to think about it. If you think, because the last quote, which I'll share, the numerical periphery of this 1,000,000 that he's saying is enlarged for the ordinary man, who lives in harmony, not even with nature, let alone his soul, but I can't read my own writing, but pursues instead unnatural complexities. They're offending to his body and to his thoughts, the spirit, the sweet sanity of nature. For him, 2 times 1,000,000 years can scarce suffice for the duration. So what Master is saying, what Yogananda is saying in that, is he's saying, yes, 1,000,000 years for somebody who is ready to proceed with 1,000,000 years, who's going to practice with intensity, who is a yogi already. But if a person, and that implies a person living in harmony, that implies, you could read this, that it implies somebody who's not even creating karma anymore, just to work out the past karma. Because cosmic consciousness is not jivan mukta, consciousness, but the cosmic consciousness implies something greater. It's great. And so this is our destiny. But where does it begin? Well, actually, I don't think it really matters where you begin, because it begins wherever you are right now. Because we are here, we're faced with this, we've been given the guidance, we've been given the blessings to be able to come onto the path and begin right now. Whether we have 1,000,000 years or whether we have maybe 100,000, who knows how long in front of us. There's that wonderful story, Chaitanya, I think it was, who was telling his different disciples how many lifetimes they had ahead of them. Each one would ask, Master, how many lifetimes do I have? And he said, oh, you have 1 more lifetime, 2 more, 3 or 4. And they would be very happy. And this Haridas came and says, Master, what about me? He said, oh, for you, 1,000. And the other disciples, hearing that, thought, oh my God, 1,000, and they were shocked. They didn't want to say anything, but they thought, oh, so bad for him. Well, they went out, and he was in the courtyard. He was dancing. He was in ecstasy. And they said, wow, didn't you hear? I mean, the Master said 1,000 years, well, that's a long time. And he says, yes. Didn't you hear what the Master said? He said 1,000 years. He says, he promised, in 1,000 years I will be free. Dance with me, brothers. Dance in my joy. And Chaitanya came out and saw them together, and he came up to Haridas and he touched them. And he said, I just wanted all of you to see of what a true devotee is made. And he immediately went into this. See, he was just testing it. He was using him as a demonstration. And so what does it matter? What does it really matter? How long? The important point is starting that first step. We have, whether it's going to take 1 million, whether it's going to take 2 million, 3 million. The fact is, that next step is the most important, because that will be the one that helps you take the next step after that, and the next step after that, and the next step after that. I've always noticed life is like that. That one thing leads to another. I would sort of jokingly say to people that we've talked to, I said, just one problem after another. And it seems like you're just solving one, another one. And actually, Yogananda said that's actually what it is. It's just it's a series of problems seeking solutions. You find those solutions and another one comes. Well, you just go like that. And this is how it is for us, is where we just take one step, another step, and another step. And I've often found that when you're in life in general, when you have a problem in front of you, the tendency can be to become very focused on that little problem right in front of you, obsessed with it, reactive to it, angry with it, whatever it might be. But your reaction doesn't necessarily make that go away. But the approach I've found that works quite well, if you have a problem in front of you, you ask yourself, what is one positive thing I can do right now? Something happens. What can I do that the next moment is positive? Do that. And you don't have to solve 10 down the road or a year down the road. You just have to solve what is the next moment of your life. What can I do that's positive? And if you do that, and do it again, you're taken, ultimately, you're in a direction that will solve that problem. And often the problem itself solves itself and goes away. Well, Kriya is like that too. Here we are, faced with this task of cosmic consciousness, of our goal, of wanting to transcend this ego, perhaps wanting to still the breath, to be able to transcend it, disconnect, to untie that cord. How are we going to do it? Take the next step, whatever that step might be, and practice the next Kriya. The Mahashaya, this is why he said, for every problem, doesn't matter, financial, marital, with your children, educate, whatever your problem is, do more Kriya. And in the process of doing that 1 Kriya, 2 Kriyas, 3 Kriyas, you change your consciousness. That's something we can do, and our consciousness changes. And in the process of changing, a different solution presents itself. Our brain, I do believe, changes. So we see life in a different way. And the solution begins where before it was blocked, now the pathway is open. So for those of you becoming Kriyabans, practice this. Do the technique, because the technique is important. It has power. But don't become obsessed with the technique alone, because there's more to it. That's this afternoon. We'll go into that this afternoon. But those of you not coming this afternoon, you're just going to have to come back. And we're going to have to explore that a little bit later this afternoon. So it's sacred. You could say, bow to it mentally. Treat it with honor. because it really is sacred, and it'll take you across that boat. But remember, you have to add these other elements too. And I'll pick that story up this afternoon.